stare straight ahead. Tell myself I am awesome until I believe. Drown my insecurities and pull out insidious thoughts like weeds. I stare at myself in a mirror and force myself to see all of the good things my negativity tries to hide from me. So I seem confident, and maybe I am, but only because I take my insecurities and other rot and I ignore them until they are no longer thought, and so I stare straight ahead. I wasn't acting in the spirit of that poem today, but I'm feeling more myself at the moment, so. This poem came to me one day. I was just minding my own business, and then I thought, I like myself for the first time in years, and I actually meant it. And this is what I came up with. I'm tall, around the waist, not that small. Bold and loud, quiet and proud. I look like how I look nowadays. I used to not like myself at all. I like how I know myself. I like how I can read for hours. I like books more than people, and that is okay. I like the music that I like and wear what I want. I dress in pink, I dress in blue, I dress in denim or sparkles or leather or tulle. I wear no makeup and hide no part of my face. I like myself. Thank you. Now, to get into my advice to educators. My experience in public schooling and not public schooling have been fraught with challenges. And my experiences are not going to match up one-to-one to any other person, no matter if they are on the spectrum or not. Because the spectrum is a spectrum, and people fall all across it. One of the issues that I have had with public schooling is that certain projects have sensory issues that I had trouble with. I dislike touching things with the consistency of most makeup. So sometimes I wouldn't want to touch glue. Or I dislike touching Play-Doh or clay or dough, like when you're making bread. So I would have trouble in certain art projects back when I was younger. And one memorable time was in second grade. We were doing an art project by taking apart owl pellets and then gluing them onto pieces of paper in designs. And not only was it disgusting, for those of you who don't know, owl pellets are what owls throw up after their meals, consisting of the fur and the bones that they don't digest properly. Not only was it disgusting, but the smell drove me nauseous, and I could not articulate that properly in a way that wasn't just, it's gross, not that it was actually a sensory challenge. And so I refused to participate in the project. I left the classroom and stayed over at the playground set and just sat there for the period. And then I actually refused to go back to class for like 2 weeks, because even after the project was over, they hung it on the walls, and the scent just drove me, it was just not a good time for me. So I missed like 2 or 3 weeks of classes, and I could not articulate why properly, and so I missed a lot of schoolwork. Another thing I have sensory issues with, another way I can be overwhelmed is that rather than the more popular pop culture definition of a meltdown that people on the spectrum have, where they're overwhelmed by outside forces, like too loud noises or too much movement or too many people around, I get overwhelmed by internal factors. Like I'm frustrated and suddenly all I see is red, or I'm angry and all I see is red. I hulk out. I basically shut down except for that emotion. And so my fight or flight instincts kick in, and instead of retreating into myself, like a bunch of other people on the spectrum do when faced with external, what's that word? Stimuli. I fight because I can't retreat because my stimuli is internal. And it comes off quite a bit like a tantrum, rather than I am overloaded with stimuli and I don't know how to articulate that properly. And so I'd calm down, and I wouldn't remember sometimes what I did when I was angry, or at least not all the details. It would all blur together for me. And so I'd have multiple experiences of hulking out in the classroom and disrupting others' learning and not being able to calm myself down properly because despite multiple times telling the teachers what I needed when this happened to me, and it being explicitly on my IEP, highlighted. My mom definitely highlighted it. I was not having the help I needed to use my coping mechanisms to calm down and break out of my shell and stop being overstimulated. One of the major rules when I melt down like that is I do not want to be talked to. I do not want to be interacted with. I want to be alone. I have enough stimuli from inside of me. I don't need external stimuli as well. A lot of people, some teachers, some peers, would try to talk me down. I'm like the Hulk. I do not get talked down. I get talked to after I calm down. And so I would have very much trouble calming down in time to rejoin the class. And I would interrupt the other kids in the class, and the whole class would not learn what they were supposed to learn instead of just me taking a break for like 10 minutes to calm down and then coming back and catching up. And that happened multiple times a month, and it was very disruptive. Moving on from there, my coping mechanisms are kind of disruptive to the class in and of themselves. I am a reader. It's my special interest, it's my hobby, it's my pastime. I read when I want to, I find reading fun. I read when I want to have fun, but I also read to calm down because it helps me if I immerse myself in other people's lives to give myself space for my own life in which I can calm down. I'm reading somebody else's life, I'm not stewing in my own anger, it calms me down. I'm reading someone else's life, not thinking about my own, so I'm not here and I have space while in those pages to calm down. It's very hard though to read during class time because for one thing I'm not listening to the lesson. To another thing, it's very much not something a teacher likes to look at when you're not listening to them and looking at your book instead of at the lesson and at them. And so I would try to use my other coping mechanisms when I needed them before I went into a full-on meltdown. I'm very physical with my fidgets. I fidget with my hands, I fidget with my hair, I bounce my knee. I do not use fidget toys, so it was hard to recognize it was me fidgeting and more like I was just expressing my energy in a way that was disruptive to my classmates because they would get distracted by my knee bouncing at the table and bouncing the table with it, or I would be not as contained as they would like with my fidgeting, and the people to my sides would get distracted by their peripheral vision of me twirling my hair or fidgeting with my fingers. And so I had very much trouble calming down and staying focused in class. And I also had very much trouble with group projects because, like I stated at the keynote when I was opening, I'm an introvert. I do not talk with people. Beyond having trouble interpreting facial expressions and tones and taking cues sometimes, I just do not like talking to people. It's not just that I'm not good at it, it's that I just don't enjoy it. And I would never know how to act in group projects. How much should I take on? Should I take on too much, not enough? What I see your cue, what does it mean? Or I'm explicitly told what to do and it just doesn't click for me sometimes. And well, it just wasn't working. Okay, so advice. I would have appreciated it if my teachers would pull me away after class sometimes to ask me what they could do for me to help me with coping. I might have enjoyed a seat by myself where I didn't have to worry about my bouncing knee shaking the table and interrupting the classmates on either side of me. I might have appreciated some sign that I could like do subtly, which means that I could take 10 minutes to read and center myself and then rejoin the lesson. I also had trouble sometimes in the transition periods because I fumbled sometimes, and I felt uncoordinated looking around me, and I was halfway through packing my stuff back in my backpack or taking it back out, and everyone else was already finished, and it would interfere with my note taking because I didn't have my pencil and my notebook out in time to start taking notes when the teacher started talking. Or I'd be late to class because it took me a while to pack up my stuff and make it to the class, and so I would miss the first 5 minutes. I might have appreciated a note taker a few times so that they could take notes and I could listen and fidget with my hands instead of having to concentrate on the talking and write without having access to my hands to fidget. And I believe that's all that we prepared to talk today.
Do you want to ask for questions?
So questions, please. You with the checkered pattern. Sorry, I think that's a checkered pattern anyway.
It definitely is. Yes. You're very articulate in explaining how it was to navigate school.
Thank you.
How did you learn how to express that?
Years of therapy and the realization that what I was trying to articulate my words across wasn't getting across. So I had to try new methods, and eventually this came about. I worked very hard and I tried different things, and then eventually I got better at articulating myself.
Your translation is very good for me. It's probably good for a lot of educators. It's calm and manageable and clear. So
Thank you. Also, writing my poetry helps because I've got to be introspective on those or they feel shallow to me. Yes, you and me, burnt orange.
So when did you know what coping strategies worked for you?
I've always known, I just had trouble articulating it. I just unconsciously twirl my hair or fiddle with my fingers, and a lot of the time I just read. But
And Mom, when did you pick up on what was calming her down and what she needed?
I appreciate that. And there was a time when she would elope or run away. She ran off campus. She used to run away from the house. And she wouldn't go far because she was smart enough to know that it was a dangerous world out there. But she got a few blocks away at times. And she has really come a long way. I think that the therapies that she's had, starting at EBC, Esther B. Clark, and then through the counselor that she has through the district and along the way with others, have really truly helped her. She did a lot of occupational therapy, controversial ABA once upon a time when she was young. Recently, she has really become centered, introspective, and she's made leaps and strides. And it has been a difficult road, and she hasn't always known or been able to implement the calming strategy. But in middle school, she did know, and had teachers listen to her more, it might have been a little smoother. It is what works for her.
okay. Question from our virtual audience. Can you read your first poem for the viewers online, which might have been missed due to auditory issues? Yes. The first poem I read when I was introducing the keynote speaker is the first poem I ever wrote with the intention of it being more than a classroom project. It started out as a classroom project. I was given a list of 20 themes and told to take 2 and make a vignette. And a set of 4 of them actually. And 2 turned out great and 2 turned out, I scrapped them. But I wrote this in 5 minutes after getting inspiration from those themes, and then I loved it so much I kept writing, and eventually I came up with this. My first book. It's got 20-ish poems, and then I came up with a second with 20 more, and I'm in the middle of writing my third. I've got like 3 down, and it just never stopped. It's called Chains of Words. It's about my experience as somebody who's an introvert, and also how my coping mechanisms of reading was not always respected. Trapped in conversations not my own and expectations I do not wish to meet. Speak, they tell me speak. What they do not understand is that I am not social by nature. Interested in a good story, a novel or movie or daydream, I fly, free. Then I am interrupted and forced to interact, trapped in words, expectations, orders. Trapped, entrapped, speak, speak, they order me while I am worlds away. Put down your story, pull off your wings, come back to the cage of social entrapments. Expectations and words made into chains. This is not who I am, but who I am made to be, forced to keep destroying my own wings.
Can you also read the first poem you read in here again?
And my mom wants me to read the first poem I read in here again. It's called Insecurities. And I don't always act in the spirit of it, but when I do, I do. And after getting nervous and totally not reading two of the poems I prepared at the introduction, I was inspired by the keynote speaker to regain my confidence. People always compliment me on my confidence in myself. I stand tall, stare straight ahead. People admire you. I admire you, people said. But deep inside, I'm insecure, unsure, the shore that waves of change in life crash into. I force my spine straight and pick up my head, stare straight ahead. Tell myself I'm awesome until I believe, drown my insecurities and pull out insidious thoughts like weeds. I stare at myself in a mirror and force myself to see all of the good things my negativity tries to hide from me. So I seem confident, and maybe I am, but only because I take my insecurities and other rot and ignore them until they are no longer thought, and so I stare straight ahead. And then the next question from my virtual viewers. What are your hopes for college? I am hoping to get into a college that has a good program for people on the spectrum, with a program with a major in English or creative writing that I can use to further my trajectory in writing poems and reading books. Any other questions? Yes, you, in the Navy.
Nice. You mentioned that you found a lot of benefit through therapy for ABA and occupational therapy. Did you ever receive any school-based counseling, and if so, did you find any value in it?
Yes. In elementary school, I did speech therapy because I had trouble with my R's, and I did not like it one bit. And in middle school, I took more speech therapy that was a bit more like actual therapy with a bit of R's therapies in there, and I didn't like it one bit. And then I got to high school, and the counselor of the social cognition program at Branham, I really liked her. And it was less therapy and more, I had a safe space to calm myself and do little things with my hands. And every once in a while, she would ask me a question or ask me how I feel, but it felt less like therapy and more like I had an adult friend that I could just hang around with. And I very much liked that. It very much helped. I started being more introspective because I engaged with her more. I liked her more. I engaged with her more. I thought deeper about my answers than just the usual, I'm fine, no, yes, whatever. And so that brought me to where I am today.
So she did occupational therapy and ABA therapy privately that we facilitated when she was in elementary school. I don't have a control group, right, a parallel control. I have no idea what worked and what didn't. I'm thrilled we are where we are today. It's been a long road. I credit those people for what they did. She would do very well at the beginning, and then something would happen and she wouldn't want to go back, and it was difficult. The speech therapy was because she had difficulty pronouncing her R's and also tone, social stories, Michelle Garcia winner, social thinking, intonation, understanding perspectives, all of that. I do think it helped, and I think the cumulative effect was very helpful, and I can't imagine where we would be without it. She had a wonderful therapist at Esther B. Clark School, and she's had a wonderful therapist through the district and through Beacon at the school next to our local school.
Wonderful.
Yes?
You mentioned that your mom highlighted the important parts, or at least you mentioned one important part in your IEP.
Yes.
So I have a question sort of for mom and maybe maybe I'm seeking some advice. As a former principal, I would always go into IEP meetings, hoping parents understood and trying to articulate that they were experts on their children and that their voice was very important in the conversation. You seem very educated, and it seems you seem very involved. You have a lot of knowledge of the work that Alyssa has done. What kind of advice do you have for parents in terms of their involvement and their voice, and especially for parents perhaps who might not have the ability to participate as much as you were able to?
So I had a leg up in that I am an attorney. I don't practice special ed law at all, and I don't know much other than what I've learned through Alyssa's life about special ed law, but I do know how to advocate. And I have used those skills, hopefully for my daughter's benefit. I think that I have. I do believe that it is important to clearly state the things that are most important when you go into an IEP meeting, and I always had notes, and I always had a few talking points, and I always knew what my end goal was. Sometimes those would change during the meetings, but just like any court hearing or trial, you have to roll with that. I do know that she's privileged and I'm privileged to have had the resources that we've had financially and in terms of education. Her dad and I both have advanced educations. And I can't imagine navigating the system with fewer resources and fewer abilities. I have a flexible job. I was able to be at all of the meetings. I can't imagine somebody who doesn't have a great command of English, doesn't have resources, and doesn't have the flexibility that we were able to enjoy. We did hire an educational consultant. We did hire an attorney briefly to review a contract that we were entering into because I didn't know the special ed law. And the ability to hire the experts was absolutely important. I do think that knowing your kid and being an expert on your own child is important. And I do think that everybody, no matter their circumstances, does know their kid best. But people are very busy and torn in a billion directions, and I do think educational consultants are expensive. Attorneys are very expensive, and it's a challenge. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you. You provided wonderful insight.
Yes.
There are, so, first of all, thank you. To share a little bit, one, there are segments of the ed code. So I'll give you all a quick story snippet. One of the things that I used to do at my last school was I would print out relevant sections of the ed code and give it to the parents. To your point, they didn't either know that they could advocate, they didn't know how to advocate, or what happened more often than not is that by the time their child had me in the 8th grade, they had spent 7 years of being told, your voice doesn't matter, we're the experts, we know how to handle it. So I would print out the relevant sections of the ed code and say, listen, there are a couple of things that you want to be equipped with. One is the fact, for example, technically, legally, your employer cannot assert any sort of punitive measures against you when you're going and doing stuff that if you look at, for example, when it comes to equity, most IEP meetings were scheduled mid-morning. And things like that. And then I remember at my last school, it's a very close friend of mine, he wanted to be able to do IEP meetings where the parents could connect in remote, and the principal said no because they were worried about security and privacy. Oh yeah. So that's one thing to do, but then of course the other side to it is to recognize that there are many bad faith actors that are in, that operate in these, that they don't want to do right by the kids, they don't want to they want to do the things that they should. That I appreciate the fact that you acknowledge the privilege that you have, but from my thinking, you shouldn't have to do all that in the first place.
Yeah. I agree with you hypothetically that I shouldn't have had to do it. I would also like to say that we've been quite fortunate. We've had good special ed directors, and we've had a very good team, and the stories I read online, the stories I've heard from others, we've had very few nightmare IEPs. We've had no nightmare IEP sessions, and only one that was quite contentious, and only one terrible, terrible, horrible, very bad math teacher. And she's actually the one that said the thing on the record that got us the fusion placement, so I'm glad it happened, but she's not my favorite. In my real job, I practice employment law, and whatever's in the ed code is nice, but the realities are that employers do take out things against people. And it's nice that the ed code says that, but that's not how it works in practice. And so if you don't have a flexible job, and if you do have a boss that isn't understanding, the ed code is fine, but you still have ramifications. And so I acknowledge that people should be able to take the time off, but it's not always as clear as the ed code. I do think that you giving the tools to the people that need the tools and don't know how to go through the legal mumbo jumbo and read the blogs and go on the Facebook groups and all of that, it's very helpful for you to provide that information. I do think the system is both broken and not broken. We've had some wonderful people advocate for my daughter, be really kind to us, offer us supports, share with us what's available. There's obviously a financial gatekeeping piece to this, and there's not unlimited money. And to some extent, it's not fair who gets the money always, but those are the realities, and the people that need it and who assert it do sometimes get it. My daughter's gotten a lot, and we're grateful for that. But she needed it. She today is a different human being than she was all along through the difficult years. Any more questions? I do, sorry.
How are you as mom getting it over being at college?
Yeah,
Thinking you'll need some strategies.
I definitely need some strategies. If anybody has any tips, I would like them. I've already spoken to a realtor. There might be a purchase of a condo. I don't know. We've got some frequent flyer miles and a companion pass. And, you know, she wants to go to school in Florida. I'm probably going to move to Florida when my younger daughter graduates from high school. Her dad's probably going to move to Florida. There aren't any colleges we have found within driving distance of our home in San Jose that have appropriate supports for my daughter. The only schools that might have supports are Cal State East Bay, or whatever it's called now, Hayward, and maybe UC Davis. But she didn't take all of the A through G requirements because we never thought that she was going to be competitive for a UC nor want to go to a UC school. I went to a UC for undergrad. That's a big environment, and it's easy to get lost. And that was not our goal for her. So we didn't focus on A through G. We focused on getting her a high school diploma, which she's about to earn. We've found a few schools in Florida that have wonderful support programs that by all accounts actually do provide monitoring, structuring, scaffolding, the kinds of things that I think she'll need to break down her projects, stay on track and not fall through the cracks. One has a living learning community, 4 kids on the spectrum with some adults that monitor. She can hopefully get her own room so that she can have a place and a quiet place to decompress. There's much more dorm availability. My greatest wish would be that there would have been a school within driving distance or in Southern California or even Sacramento that, well, I guess that's driving distance, that would provide the supports that we've found out of state. So I don't know how I'm going to do it. It's my younger daughter is very busy with 17 sports and 18 activities, and I'm her Uber driver until she drives, so hopefully that'll keep up and keep me busy. But I just need her to text me back and FaceTime me and tell me that she's alive and well. And my greatest fear for her is that she will not self-advocate. She will not understand what she's not understanding. And I don't know how to teach her what she's not understanding. I don't know how to teach myself what I'm not understanding until it's too late. And so if she's not feeling well, hopefully she'll tell somebody and take the right steps. If she doesn't understand a project, hopefully she'll understand that she doesn't understand it. That kind of thing is my greatest fear. Yeah. Yes?
I'm speaking with my former special ed director hat. There is a list of universities that have programs for students with disabilities. I know University of Arizona has a lot of programs for students with disabilities. Kennesaw State in Georgia has a program as well. I can't recommend enough is using the disability office. It is an underused resource that students with disabilities don't fully utilize. So going there you're going out of state, other states are a little different than California. In other states, I'm not from another state actually. When kids graduate with a regular diploma, their IP usually ends. And so they have to have like a 504, or the universities make you go through a whole bunch of testing to get an accommodation plan. So just making sure you research that, and I work with Alyssa, so if you have any questions, Alyssa can put us in connection. It's so important when you go out of state, because other states have different guidelines.
I appreciate that. We've worked with a private college counselor who specializes in kids on the spectrum and placement. We do know about the SALT program at University of Arizona, just for some street cred, that we didn't just decide to send her to Florida without looking at the closer states. We've looked at ASU and some other schools as well. I do know that the IEP ends and she needs to go and advocate for herself. I would love to talk to you to see what you know that I don't yet know, because I'm all about researching and paving the way for her as well as possible, and so thank you.
The difference is if they have an office for students with disabilities. So the student must go and they won't talk to the parent. They talk to the student. And so that's a huge shift for parents, right? They have a hard time, right? So the student has to go and be present for the conversations, and they have to, they give you textbooks, they'll give you computers, they'll help with registration. They help with everything for students with disabilities.
A lot of them are called like access.
Yes.
Universities.
Oh, it's a university.
If you go to some
Like
junior
community
college.
college is not like
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, the
They call
deal,
them
they all
student
have.
services or different.
Oh, gotcha, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, you in the back there.
Did you ever have days in high school where you just didn't want to do any work? You just were not into it, and how could the teacher have helped you better?
Yes. To elaborate, when it wasn't just a question, after I started actually going to school and, if not liking it, then at least not hating it and participating and trying, sometimes I'd get days where I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I'd feel fatigued, I couldn't concentrate very well, I'd have just trouble working up the motivation to do anything really. The best thing I found that I can do is, except it's might not work the same as everyone else as to me, because I have one-on-one schooling at the moment, so my teachers really only have to teach to me, and they can tailor their lessons more than others. But I go up to my teacher and I tell them I'm having an off day, I have trouble concentrating, trouble having motivation to do anything really, and sometimes my teacher, most of the time really, my teacher will have a day where they've toned down what they're doing. So instead of a big project, they'll maybe put it off for next week and next session, whatever, and today we're going to watch a documentary so I can participate without having to do much other than listen. Or they'll give me, or they'll ask if there's something important that they've got to do in the next week or so, if I can do it today, and if I can't, we'll figure something out. I don't know how that would work in regular public schooling, but for me, that really helped. The being able to advocate for myself and get at least an acknowledgement that I wasn't at my best, even if they couldn't do anything.
I think that that's been a real benefit to Fusion Academy, but is going to be a real challenge in college and in the work world and in real life. And we all face it, right? I mean, there's nothing specific to Alyssa that would make her feel unmotivated one day and not the next. I think that's going to be a huge challenge, and she's hopefully going to be able to advocate for herself and do enough to make it up later, or whatever she needs to do. Going back to just talking about advocacy, I do see so many horror stories online, on the Facebook groups, in the Parents Helping Parents group, the people I've chatted with and tried to network with over the years. I guess the educators are clearly on the front lines doing their best jobs, right? And too many kids in the class, too few resources, too much, COVID's complicated it all. But even way back when, I really felt like most teachers were trying, but I also recognized the challenge that each kid is different. And honestly, I couldn't teach in a class of 20 to 35 or 40 kids, however many there are in a class, and understand each child's individual proclivities. So I think we have actually a real hurdle. And what resonated with Chris's keynote this morning was that we're going to reinvent things, we're going to get better, we're going to do things differently, but we're going back to kind of the same classroom situations. And the truth is that if you have 30-something kids in a class and one likes to not be talked to, one likes to have interpersonal interaction, one likes to fidget, one can't stand fidgeting, one likes it loud, one likes it quiet, I don't honestly know how it can work well. And I don't think I have much educational trauma because I got through pretty easily, thankfully. But I can see that it's a real issue, and you all face challenges that are truly uphill. And I am so grateful for everything that she's gotten and everybody who's really tried to accommodate her and us. I do think that having resources and being articulate and knowing your child and knowing yourself has been invaluable, but we've tried everything. I mean, we tried a regular class, we tried an aid, we tried a non-public school, we tried a special ed class, we tried fusion, we tried, and nothing's been perfect. And so I really don't know what the answer is, and I hate to approach the end on a down note. I give everybody so much credit and thanks, and the fact that you're all here listening and wanting to have advice and wanting to get better means everything, because there's kids really struggling. And there aren't that many resources. I mean, I've networked and looked for resources locally, and it's shocking to me how few there are. And yet also she's gotten a ton of them. So depending on my mood and depending on the exact question, it's either really a lot of resources or not a lot of resources.
When you say resources, could you be specific of
Yeah.
what additional resources would you want to see?
Sure, somebody who really gets her. The speaker this morning who heard her poem and completely understood what she said, what it meant, the fact that she can sit up here and talk to you. She can stand up in front of a couple hundred people and speak. But honestly, she doesn't want to chit-chat with any of you about anything. She's not going to want to talk to me in the car on the way home. She doesn't have peer friendships. She doesn't want to have small talk, and she's not social. She shines in this situation. She can talk to you and at you. So,
Not with you, though.
but not with you. And that's a distinction that the keynote speaker heard so clearly, and I was really impressed. There's a psychiatrist who we had met with on a private basis to learn how to help parent an Asperger's kid. And then there was a summer camp that she went to and ran away from, and we had to pick her up, and I got called away from a business conference, but bygones. There's very few educational advocates. There's very few attorneys, and they're very high priced. It's very hard to afford them. In schools, the resource teacher really didn't get her. He didn't listen. One particular guy, her freshman year at the one school over school that she named, he didn't get it. He wasn't really good. He didn't listen. He was distracted. He didn't understand. And he only had 6 kids that period. And we said, look, leave her alone. Don't engage with her. And he just didn't get it. What resources would I like? A mentor, an organization that could shepherd me through so that I didn't spend so much time and effort constantly stressing, researching, trying to piece together answers. And again, I know how to research, and I know how to call, and I know how to ask. But there's not a person who can guide people through. And some of the therapists are fabulous, some are not. I guess I'm looking for a more all-inclusive, supportive structure so that parents could trust in a system and put their faith and confidence and child in the hands of somebody who knew what they were doing, and that doesn't exist.
You ever reach out to SELPA? You know what SELPA is?
I do. I read. What? Okay. Tell me exactly what, I mean, I've seen the acronym. Tell me exactly what you mean by that.
So SELPA, Special Education Local Plan Area, and at least where I'm director down in Ventura County, one main role that we have is to help parents navigate through the whole process. We take parent phone calls, we provide parent trainings, we are a resource for parents. So I just want to make sure that people here listening know that SELPAs, and there's one in every county in the state, should be doing that for their families, I would hope.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure. Go ahead.
We have two SELPA directors in Santa Clara County, and so I can provide you with that information, but we do have two SELPA directors that do often support, families in giving advice and recommendations, so that is also a support for you, and you can find them on our website as well.
So I'm fascinated by that because we've dealt with so many people in so many settings, through so many schools and so many districts, and nobody's made that suggestion. And so that's the kind of lapse. So that's the kind of information that answers the question about people should know that. I should have known that. And I'm a little bit ashamed that I didn't know that. And yet, every single time most of the time I've gone to a meeting, I've said to people, what should I be asking for that I didn't? Or what should I know that I don't? And, you know.
That's a failure on us for not putting the right resources out there.
I don't want you to feel ashamed. That's a failure on our school system for not being able to say, hey, have you reached out to your SELPA? Because they can help answer questions, they can make sure you're on the right path. I mean, that's what we do.
I think it's important for us to hear things like that, to elevate your voice so that we know we're not getting the resources in the right hands, so we can double up those efforts. That's one of the reasons I was asking about the counseling piece, because if there's advocation behind it, I'm a huge supporter of having that available to all students all the time, not just because it's in an IEP, but it's something that can benefit everybody. So if there's programs and supports that you've experienced that have worked wonders for you or that you advocate for, having your voice behind that means way more than having me speaking to the people sitting on this side of the table. And I think it's really important to elevate those voices and those opinions. It's just nice to hear you affirm that, but again, it speaks to the sense that we can do more to make sure that people know what's available, make sure that people know what supports are there, because if there's ever a question about where to go or who to contact, then our process has failed you.
That's it. It's very interesting. Go ahead.
When Mom said that kids could enjoy loud or they can enjoy not so loud, I got an idea. So I remembered something. Back in 3rd grade, my teacher introduced me to background music, and it's helped a lot. Because when I get distracted, there's nothing but my thoughts there. But if there's background music, there's something I expect that I know already that's going to be there to bounce off of from. I'm focused on my schoolwork, I get distracted. Hey, wait, I don't have to listen to my thoughts. There's music, and it's real, and I can go back and focus on the thing while still listening, because I can focus on 2 things at once, as long as it's not my thoughts and something very focus intensive. And then I will zone back into my schoolwork. I just bounce off of the background music, and I thought that might be helpful. Okay, question?
Would it be helpful for you as a student to fill out a survey, a questionnaire, something that says what I wish my teachers knew about me? I know an IEP is supposed to describe all of that, but.
Maybe.
Okay.
And did you ever attend your IEPs?
In high school, yes.
So she was too volatile before high school to attend, but in high school she's attended them all. And in terms of, is there a questionnaire that she could have filled out? Not only has she been given questionnaires, but believe me, every time she started a new school or a new teacher, I sent an email with, here's what she's like, here's what helps, here are the triggers, please respect this. And a few teachers paid attention and acknowledged the emails. Some never acknowledged the emails, and we'd meet in an IEP meeting a few weeks later, and I'd say, did you read my email? And they said, no. But believe you me, I sent a clear email. Yes?
is to send like a video of themselves and their unique disability. So hopefully as a senior, she will have her exit IEP, and she will lead that portion of the meeting, and she invites whoever she wants to invite. And she'll get an opportunity to say the things that she likes, how she learns, and I recommend you record that, because that's something she can share with her professors when she goes to college, and to email them. And one thing a lot of parents don't know about, that every CELPA has a parent rep, and every CELPA has a group of parents that come together to support parents in the district, and they do some training, it's called a CAC. And so they work together. I actually used to work in your district at a different school, and also the feeder district if you've been to your high school, and that they have that in that district.
Well, that's another acronym I haven't heard, and I've been advocating for her since before elementary school. So there is a lapse, and it may be on my part.
This was very good at throwing acronyms around.
I think we have time for one more question. Anybody?
Let me just think of it. Oh, we have one more.
You said you had one teacher that you kind of opened up to a lot, had a lot of conversations. But what is that individual teacher do?
It was a therapist, not a teacher, but
Apologies.
yeah.
Yeah, what did that therapist do to make you feel comfortable?
I actually don't remember. It was 3.5 years ago-ish. I was much more volatile than I was now. Still better than I was in previous years, but I don't know. What I know nowadays that she does for me is that she gives me a safe space where I can center myself. There's very little talking except if I'm in the mood. She gives me art supplies to just do whatever I want with. I'm allowed to put on music as long as it's not loud enough to interrupt the class next door. And we just sit and catch up and talk. More than I ever thought I'd ever talk to anybody.
I just have one additional comment. I thank you both for being here. I think part of what you're sharing around advocacy is amplifying your experience. Because even something you just literally learned that you now can share within your network, I think it's important for you all to do that. I just, for me, as I'm listening to you all, I'm thinking about, that's what I was just sharing with Beatrice and Shara, you know, I would just encourage you not to default to blame the teacher, because I'll give you an example. My last 11 years in the classroom, my average class size was 45, and I had 15 IEPs per class. So the whole idea around, to me, the issue is the system itself. There's a lack of resources, there's a lack of access, and there's a lack of financial investment in providing children, especially even like your daughter, you have a prime example of what I call the least restrictive opportunity for them to be successful. And I hear your story, I've heard a lot of yours, but my experience is the exact opposite. That's why I said, even not getting my last school, I mentioned printing out the ed code, I got written up for that. Because the principal said, you're feeding information to the parents. Information that they can get, but it's like, here's how you can do this. So my point in sharing all this is, one, is thank you all for sharing your story, because I do think it's important for people to hear that not everything is what they put on the news around some child who's overcome some obstacle or some teacher who's become the savior for their children. That's not the norm. People need to hear what you all are sharing, that these are the situations that parents have to navigate if they have the resources, which I don't think you should. I think the resources and the system should be in place for that. But also to be able to say, look, here's what worked for me, and it can be a starting point for you as well. So that way a parent doesn't feel like they're alone, and they don't feel like they have no options for their own child, or even for themselves.
We have one more minute. I had maybe a retort here.
Well, not a retort at all. I was just gonna appreciate you for amplifying the ways in which our system goes after those folks that provide information to parents that they did not have previously. You know, an email thread that includes a parent and staff, where you're informing a parent about something that they have access to, and then someone comes back and says, how could you put that on the thread with the parent there?
Yep.
How could you not have put that on the thread with the parent there?
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you for amplifying that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, I think we're out of time. Thank you all for listening and coming to our breakout session. And
Want to show that in case?
I've got a QR code up here for my first book if anyone wants to check it out after the session. Thank you again for listening.